Yeah, Catherine and I are in charge of that. If neither one of us is here, whoa, we're in trouble, right? Yeah.
So Carla, now that you're able to be with us,
Yes.
you can also be part of the remind us to hit record.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah, just sit on this side of the room because that's what people over here do.
We just come in at the last minute and sit in.
That's important too.
Okay.
Yeah.
We value your input.
So,
And I think
Carla, do you know everybody? And I was just gonna see if,
I'm not sure about Dawn. I'm not sure who she is.
okay. Oh yeah, because there's no picture.
No, yeah.
So the Lydics, Evelyn sang the solo at Youth Sunday.
Mhm. Okay,
Yeah,
yes.
so that's-
yes.
Mom.
That's
Dawn
her
is
mom. Oh,
Evelyn's mom.
gotcha. Hey, nice to meet you, Dawn.
Nice to meet you. I'm on my phone, so it's weird. So I'm going to go back to no picture.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay.
Well, she did last week.
Oh, she did?
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
Oh,
okay.
that's right, she did.
So we're picking up with chapter 6, which I'm going to remind myself because I read most of it sitting at the playground after picking up the kids from school last Monday. But it describes sort of the rise of Reagan and the alliance with the religious right. Because last week we sort of ended with Jimmy Carter and how evangelicals had all sort of turned on him, abandoned him.
Because he wimped out.
Mhm. And he wore
Wore sweaters.
cardigans. Yes.
Talk to Playboy.
Mhm. Wait, did he? I don't know that part. Did Jimmy Carter do a
That was
Playboy
when he
interview?
lusted in his heart.
Yeah, right.
Oh, that's where that's from.
He actually did-
Interesting.
He actually did an interview with Playboy. Yes. he did.
Okay.
Mhm.
Some people say they read it for the articles. Those are the articles they're talking
Yeah,
about.
that's good.
I actually know someone who wrote their dissertation on the articles in Playboy.
Oh,
so-
wow.
How about that?
That is interesting.
They do have some good articles, though, from what I understand.
I did not
From what
attend.
you understand.
I did not attend this woman's defense in order to hear what she had to say. So I actually do not know anything about the
wow.
articles.
You
in the-
dropped that bombshell
Well,
and don't have it.
I'll bet you could look up that
I
dissertation.
probably could. I probably could.
Let's see, Jimmy Carter Playboy.
Okay. But one of the things it talks about is Reagan sort of being from a John Wayne-esque tradition in that he was never as big of an actor as John Wayne, but he was a popular actor.
In
He
war movies and
Mhm.
sports movies and
Mhm.
things like that.
Canute Rockney.
And he technically did serve in the military, unlike John Wayne, but it was in the like public affairs, making
Mhm.
you know,
Making war movies.
propaganda films and things like that for the military. But was not as particularly religious at the time that he was sort of started to be adopted as a champion for these
I'm
groups.
looking back through what I notes I made, and on this, it was talking about how James Robinson got all this group together to
Mhm,
start supporting him.
mhm.
But the line that I highlighted said James Robinson wasn't just calling for political participation. It's time for God's people to come out of the closet, out of the churches, and change America. That's not we use that term anymore.
Out of the closet, no.
No, no, sure isn't.
No.
All these people were closeted.
Wow.
Reagan, I mean, one of the things a lot of disciples know Reagan for is that he grew up disciple.
Mhm.
So his mom was a devout disciple, was raised in Disciples Church, and then went to Eureka College, which is a disciples college in Eureka, Illinois. But then married into Presbyterianism, and so then was primarily a member at Bel Air Presbyterian Church in Los Angeles, which is a very big, very wealthy, more conservative leaning Presbyterian church. And throughout most of then his adult life was sort of nominally religious in that he was a member at a church. He would go there sometimes, but that it was not a huge influence on his life. But like Nixon, he learned to speak the language. and learn the importance of being able to speak the language. And then let's see. I was trying to think of when was that big event where he basically said to all of the sort of gathered religious conservative groups who were all in one place, basically, I am your candidate.
That when he said, you, you can't endorse me, but I endorse you.
Yes.
I don't remember where that was.
Mhm.
Well, that was that James Robinson get together.
Okay, that was the same one you're
Yeah.
referencing.
In 1980.
Okay. So what, aside from, you already mentioned one of the things that stuck out, what were some of the other things in this chapter that stuck with you or jumped out to you all? Or things you learned that maybe you didn't know prior?
Something that jumped out to me, page 104, maybe. So what had drawn Reagan to the Republican Party were the same things that had drawn evangelicals, a mix of anti-communism, rough word, Christian nationalism and nostalgia for a mythical American past. And I love just this idea of how everyone just thinks America in the past was just so great. Like, you know, my childhood was so amazing and we should have that America again.
Mhm.
But then, so, you know, my 90s childhood had people who grew up in the 70s thinking, man, I miss my 70s America. And
Yeah, instead of make America great again, make America white again.
yes,
Yes, I was gonna say, it depended on who you were.
Right.
Sure,
The
yeah.
experiences
Who
were
was
that
that
you
good
thought it
for?
was that great, yeah.
Yeah, you don't hear a lot of Black folks saying, I would like to go back to the 1950s.
Yeah.
That's where
Yeah.
Sure.
Those are really
those were so much
Why
better.
don't we go back to the 1850s?
Oh, yeah, there you
then,
go,
right?
yeah,
Yeah, in the South. Mhm.
I can't remember which comedian it was who has the joke about you will never see a movie where a Black person invents a time machine
It goes
to,
back.
to go back in time. There was a very short limit on how far back any Black person would want to go.
that's,
White people are always wanting to go back to all these previous
Yeah.
ages.
that sounds like a Roy Wood Jr. thing to say.
Maybe it is. Yeah.
Hey, Dawn, I think it is your phone that's giving us the background noise.
That is Moana. You can hear.
You guys can hear Moana through here? That is too
Yes.
funny. I'm sorry.
That's
I'll
okay.
turn it down some. She's mostly napping.
Oh,
So we'll
that's
turn it
okay.
down. I'm so sorry, guys.
No, you're good.
Okay.
It's the beauty.
Well, and this is a little trickier to use on my phone. I can't control the mute as well as I did before. I
Sure.
And now you're muted.
Like I,
You
so
can.
if I go to this one page, it mutes me, but then I can't see you guys. So it's crazy. So now I'm
Right.
done speaking. I can push the
That's-
done speaking.
That's the downside with the phone version is you have to like swipe between screens to get to the different
you know,
functions. So, but yes, the idea that every generation has a romanticized version of the past that they want to return to that never actually existed in the way they imagined that it once did.
Well, it goes on after, well, no, that was where you were reading. I've got something highlighted here. Talking about the masculinity. It says that Reagan's irrefutable masculinity also reassured conservatives unsettled by the gay rights movement.
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't lost on conservative Christians that Carter's own masculinity lacking, even as the homosexual movement reached its maximum level of influence under his watch.
And maybe I just have missed that. I did not think of the late 70s as a period of rising, like
Yeah.
gay and lesbian acceptance. And maybe it was, but in the way that I understand history, after Stonewall, you have a lot of sort of incremental progress, but not a big swell of support.
Well, I think one of the
Another-
things that happened in the 70s, though, was just the genders weren't so distinct. You know, the guys were wearing the long hair, the girls were wearing long hair, they were all wearing loose clothing. And then as you got into the 80s, you had more androgynous rock stars. So that
Sure.
was being combated at the same time because
Mhm.
Yeah.
Another thing I highlighted was the for conservatives, tough on crime generally connoted only certain types of crime. Street crime or the threat of black men. Domestic violence, sexual assault, and child abuse didn't register.
Mm.
Right.
You know,
And
that
later in the
struck me
chapter-
too, because they talked about it a little bit later too. You know, maybe it was this book. I've been reading so many things, but you know, always this constant fear that black men were after white women, where if you go back in history, you're going to say it's the opposite. White men were raping black women at a much higher degree.
Right.
Exactly.
Mhm.
That's one of the reasons we have so many mixed race folks. Basically going back to the slave days.
Well, I was reading an unrelated article this week that was talking about genetics and things like that. And it was talking about something in Asia, but it gave the example of in the United States today, the average black person has 20% white DNA, 80% black DNA.
Mm-hmm.
Was talking about the example of that is how prevalent it was for slaveholders and
Mhm,
others
mhm,
to rape their.
Do you ever watch?
and-
Yeah. Do you ever watch Roots with Dr. Gates on PBS?
I
And
love
whenever
it.
he has guests on,
Great, I've never seen it.
I was just about to say
oh,
that.
I love it. Yeah. Almost every
that's what they
person of
should.
color, black person, African American, they have some white ancestry, and the ancestry goes back. Usually, it was a master that raped a slave to get that percentage going on in there. So they're not only related to the slave in the inventory, but they're related to the master who owned them. So it's really weird mixed feelings for those folks.
Right. And it even shows a lot of the ancestors that were like Jamaica down in the
Mhm.
Caribbean, they have the same situation.
Mm.
And a lot of those people
Mhm.
were coming to the United States thinking, oh, well, they're black Jamaican and they're all black, and they're not.
Mm.
It's sometimes really startling to them.
Mhm.
I was kind of surprised at how the Southern Baptists were a lot more progressive back in the day compared to where they are now. That surprised me a
Oh,
lot.
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Much more, which is why we are no longer Southern Baptists.
Mhm. It's like it says on page 107, talking about this sort of broad, kind of big umbrella for Southern Baptists, that you had Billy Graham, you had Criswell in Dallas, but you also had Jimmy Carter and you also had Bill Clinton.
Mhm.
And I think Al Gore also. Yes. So both of them were Southern Baptist
Mhm.
when they ran on a ticket together in 1992.
See, and then it goes on to 109. It's talking about and this is really resonating with me right now because I find it to be so true. The large number of Southern Baptists, even denominational officials, lacked any real theological prowess and were in fact functional atheological. Concerns over inerrancy gave way to a newly politicized commitment to female submission and related culture war issues. But so many pastors today are people in the role of preacher, minister, pastor, mostly these non-denominationals. They have no degree in theology.
Right.
Some do, most don't, and they don't have degrees in counseling. Drew was asking me about one church that we used to go to, and he says, well, what do you think of this guy that we used to have? And I said, I think he was more of a business person. He was so focused on the numbers.
Right.
And we lost the role of the neighborhood church like Ridgely, where, and the book talks about that. I just hadn't recognized it, where the authority came from the local church, and we kind of policed each other versus this vast mega church that set aside all these very strict rules to keep everybody in line. It's crazy.
Yeah, it is. What are you gonna say? David lived a lot of
Yeah, I
that.
love when
Yeah.
yeah. I love
Yeah,
when,
right.
and this is a stereotype, I love when the good old boys try to come after me with biblical knowledge when they've barely read the Bible, but they just heard it from some pastor.
Mhm.
That's why I appreciate
and-
people like your aunt, Russ, that know what
Oh,
they're
sure.
talking about when they've studied the language. And our last
Mhm.
pastor was like that. They brought in, they studied Greek and Hebrew and brought in other people that did that and can give you
Mhm.
context and the meanings of the words. And it just goes so much deeper.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, David lived a lot of this Southern Baptist takeover, because he was in seminary at that time,
Mm.
and it was pretty rough.
It's a little PTSD.
Yeah, I was wondering as I was reading this chapter.
Well, interesting for me when over here, I guess on 111 or so, where it talks about where Falwell was and the others were talking about the United States was one middle of 111 was no longer the military might of the world, no longer committed to victory, no longer committed to greatness. For the first time in 2 centuries, American survival as a free people was in doubt. Well, I was in active duty in the Air Force from 1976 to 1980. So that was during the period of Jimmy Carter's presidency,
Mhm.
and I turned 18 a month after or 2 months after I enlisted, and so I was pretty young at that point, even finishing up my 4 years. And I thought, and I look at that as the low point, probably in the history of the Air Force, because I when I was leaving the Air Force, finishing my 4 years, I thought there can't be much of anything that's more messed up than this.
Mhm.
But morale was low and the discipline wasn't as strong as it could have been. And I nearly just walked away from it completely. But for some reason, there was a colonel there who was in the reserve, and he worked there as a civilian down at headquarters in San Antonio, and he talked me into staying in the reserve. And I saw the Air Force swing back, particularly when they instituted core values, and they started, and this gets to what I was talking about that interview today, but the values is I look at that and those 3 core values, service before self, or integrity first, service before self, and excellence in all we do. Those 3 core values, I think, just emphasis of those transformed the Air Force, in my opinion, because beyond that, I stayed in the reserve for 33 more years. And so I saw it change, I saw it transform. And I think that it was interesting what he said here about the military, because I think the other branch of the military were kind of in that predicament as well.
That is how people in the Army talk about that period, the post-Vietnam
Yeah.
drawdown,
Yeah.
and just who was left in the military, like after way everything had gone there. Yeah, it was a very demoralized force, but it was also because you had built it up and that's unsustainable. Then you have to have the drawdown, and you have that kind of up and down throughout the history of.
I was very much involved in Cold War type efforts too, because I worked as an intelligence analyst.
Mm.
Sure.
And so, I spent a year and a half in Japan where we were looking at the eastern side of what was happening in the Soviet Union during that time. So that, and then, and I'm down in San Antonio the last 2 years. James Robinson, I went to one of his rallies at Castle Hills Baptist in North San Antonio. I remember being there. I don't remember much about what he said, but I remember the force with which he preached that rally. And you know, I was listening to a lot of what people were saying about this type of stuff then.
You actually lived it. That's crazy.
One of the things that was really wild to me was just seeing that not only was evangelicalism or their evangelical leaders supporting more sort of militarism or boosts in military spending, all those kind of things, but also were opposing nuclear disarmament, like treaties and efforts between us and the Soviet Union to like both draw down our number of weapons. But they didn't get into it as much in this book, but there was an interview I heard a couple weeks ago by Bart Ehrman, who's a biblical scholar who has a new book about like Revelation and how it has been popularly interpreted and used. And he talked about how many people with this very apocalyptic view of the world were then in the Reagan administration and influencing policy, and how that influences your nuclear policy and also your environmental policy. If you think the world is and supposed to be destroyed, and that's what you want to unfold, or you see it as imminent because they were all influenced by Hal Lindsey's late great Planet Earth, and that was the worldview they had adopted.
Yeah. Yeah.
I sort of assumed that like nuclear drawdowns or something, like, well, at least everybody can agree with that. With that it's if multiple countries are agreeing to reduce their arsenals, but they're like, nope, that makes us weaker, we shouldn't even do that.
Yeah.
And I guess the back end of the chapter gets into the start of the Iran Contra stuff with the Reagan administration's wanting to support the Contras. I didn't know about the religious dimension of that.
Didn't either.
I knew some about that you had sort of Catholic like liberation theology in Central America, and that tended to be more sympathetic to socialist approaches to government because they saw them as supporting the poor or, challenging these sort of dictators.
But they were demonized as being Marxist.
Right. Yes, absolutely.
So they were demonized and taken it to the extreme just to discredit what their points were and what they were trying to do.
Yeah. Which, as we've kind of seen through the book so far, you can't ever say about your opponent, well, they do make some good points. Like, you're not allowed to ever do that. You have to paint them as they're this,
Because
like
they're your enemy.
Yes. Yeah. You don't see them anything or try to find any common ground.
Or don't even see him as human.
That's what a friend of ours said the other day, that she's diametrically opposed to us on everything. Sometimes just out of spite, I swear. And I said, I think that if people would have honest discussions, we could find common ground and we could achieve some things. You may not agree with me on everything, but there's something in the middle of here somewhere that we can both say is okay. And she says, do you really believe that? And I was like, well, yes, I do, but
Obviously she doesn't.
you do not. And you can't have a discussion with someone who's not willing to talk. It's true.
I'm not really willing to
Yeah.
listen.
Yeah, listen,
as well, yeah.
especially, yeah.
It's my way or the highway.
Well, it's very prevalent in thinking about what Oliver North was doing in the Iran Contra issues that and there is even a quote in here, I don't remember where it is, but where they say that the end justifies the means. And it was very much, I mean, later on in my involvement with SBC, I saw religious leaders just act that out repeatedly, that the end justifies the means, and it didn't matter who they ran over to get their desired end. It was okay. It was justified because they had this noble goal, this noble outcome that they were hoping to achieve.
Mhm. And until I read this, I'd never really made the connection that Oliver North's sort of religious perspective was what aligned with his idea that sure, I'm doing things that aren't legal, but it's okay because I'm doing them for the right reasons.
Yeah.
I
Mhm.
was reading
Right?
that.
Mm.
Yeah, he became a Christian though because of a James Dobson book,
Right.
Mhm.
which is just wacky.
Yeah,
Or, well, became an evangelical.
Yeah,
I
well,
guess
that
he
may be
had,
what
he
it
had been
was.
a Catholic.
Right, he
But that's when
converted
he
because
kind
of,
of,
I thought I had
his,
that
his,
underlined.
his marriage was about to end and,
Mhm.
yeah,
we
so,
went to counseling together and everybody got along after that.
but they.
Well, I
and
like
he
that he
credit-
did get some pushback from Democratic Senator George Mitchell. I won't read the whole
Oh,
thing, but
love
he's
Mhm.
isn't that good? Says, and although he's regularly asked to do so, God does not take sides in American politics. And in America, disagreement with the policies of the government is not evidence of lack of patriotism. You know, you
Mm.
can still love God,
Exactly.
still love this country. It's just, yeah, when they try to own it like that, only our side loves God. That's
Mhm.
really tough to swallow.
God only loves our side.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
I underlined that too. I've lost him.
I think it was further on in the other chapter.
It may be
123. Page
Yeah,
123.
that's still good. That
Mhm.
yeah.
She did not go into Oliver North running for Senate, which he did in
Yeah.
1994, which I remember very well because I grew up in Virginia and I remember when that happened and he was
Oh,
running. I went to see him. I was in like the Youth and Government Club and you'd get extra points or whatever for going to like political events or whatever. And so we went to Withville, Virginia to some Oliver North event and saw him speak at it. And he ended up losing to Charles Robb, who was running for re-election. But yeah, he had lots of support from evangelicals and other
Yeah.
folks like that when he ran for Senate.
yeah, and I underlined also, the same familiar topics that he used for his run for Congress. So says he targeted key demographics: anti-gun control, pro-life, school prayer, strong defense, anti-gay, and the like.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Sounds very familiar.
Mhm.
And his support, there was what's right and what's legal, and the two are not always the same. If North lied, it must have been necessary.
Mm.
There was no doubt because he was a good soldier.
Wow.
Mhm.
Yeah, it says that Falwell put a lot of effort into making him appear to be a national hero.
Mhm.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, there were definitely a lot of people who latched onto him and saw him as someone they could project what they wanted to onto him and turn him into the
That-
person who was
That
useful to their
whole
cause.
thread of masculinity, though, there was
Mhm.
right there with him too.
Mhm.
I mean, that quote at the end of the chapter 6, where he talks about he's not going to challenge the decision of the commander in chief for whom I still work. It just, it was almost a cultic type of following at that point too. I mean, I understand being in a position of, military officer where you're to obey the legal orders that are provided to you, but
Mhm.
he went beyond that.
Well, and maybe the military was different then, but they spend a lot of time when we do ethics training and things like that, putting into our heads that you have the freedom to act if you think an order you've been given is illegal, immoral, or unethical.
Mhm.
Like you have a duty to
Yeah,
not
civil
follow
servants
orders,
go
like-
through the same thing, yeah.
I don't think there was as much of
But
that
are you gonna
emphasis,
do, are you
yeah.
gonna do that and jeopardize ruining your career in a lot
Sure.
of cases? No.
Yeah.
You'll just suck it up and do what they tell you to do.
Mhm.
Don't you want to be a good soldier?
Mhm.
But
Not that I ever did
No,
that.
yeah.
But the direction North takes it is not, well, I was just doing what I was told. It was, how dare you question me for doing what I was told? I'll gladly do what I'm told,
Mhm.
and not feel bad about it.
That's right.
So,
But he wasn't.
which is a
he
very
wasn't being
dangerous
told-
attitude to have.
But he was initiating some of that too. It wasn't just
Yeah.
him being told that.
Right, exactly.
Well, as far as we know, anyway.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I don't fully grasp about Iran Contra was the amount of time that he spent talking about himself following orders, but also then trying to say, but no one knew about this
Mhm,
who shouldn't have known about this.
mhm.
So protecting Reagan and other people while also at the same time saying that you're following orders of those above you.
Giving them at least.
don't see how those-
Plausible
Yeah.
deniability somewhere in there. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah, that's why, so we can't know for certain.
And even Beverly LaHaye distributing beautiful full color pictures of North.
All the marketing, yeah.
Mm.
Oh, I liked the part where some of the stuff didn't sell, so that was kind of cool.
Yeah. Too much of it. Jennifer, anything here that connected with you or that stuck with you?
Oh, sorry. I have been listening. I just my allergies are killing me today, so sorry.
No, you're good. I just didn't want to stall
No.
the dominating the discussion.
Sometimes it's hard to jump in from the Zoom. when there's a lot of
Yeah.
people in the
No,
room.
it's okay. Like I was pretty young when all that Oliver North stuff was going on, but I real vaguely remember it, and I do remember even being young being confused, like why. I just remember thinking that it was so strange to me that we were all supposed to support him and think that it was fine. And I just remember being really confused about that whole situation, but not really being old enough to understand the details, but just thinking, well, this is weird that he's on trial and it looks like he did something bad, but we're all fine with it. I don't know.
Mhm.
But that's kind of my vague recollection.
Mhm.
I also had the same confusion because I was probably 8, 9 when all that was happening. And I remember it being like on at my house because it was on like all the major networks
Mhm.
during the day. They would preempt the Price is Right and the soap operas to have the
Mhm.
Yeah.
those hearings.
You got
congressional
to
hearings on it.
watch that when you were a kid. I got to watch them killing people in Vietnam.
Oh, geez.
It's on the TV,
With a dinner, yeah.
the news every night.
Mhm,
Yeah.
every night.
But
I don't remember much about this other than it was in the headlines every day because I was in the middle of having lots of babies
Mhm.
and I didn't pay much attention to what was going on otherwise.
I didn't really pay much attention to politics at all back then,
No, I didn't. either.
unfortunately.
I remember my parents seeming to say that this person is a heroic figure and me not being able to understand. But I'm like, but everything seems to indicate that this person broke the law multiple times.
Yeah.
And I don't understand how, if he was breaking the law, why
They should
that's
be.
good. And they're like, well, he was just doing what
Mhm.
and it was always just, well, he's in the military and he was just doing what he was told.
Yeah.
And that's what you're supposed to do. Like, okay, but okay, I don't know. Maybe when I'm older, this will all make sense.
Yeah.
I remember
And here we are.
there was no contrition. at
Yeah.
all.
Sure, right.
I mean, he
Well,
firmly.
no, because he thought he did, well, he
Yeah.
said he did what was right, whether he thought that truthfully or not, but.
Mhm.
Well, I was in high school and college when all this was going on, so I was a little preoccupied that way. But just
Mhm.
being an Enneagram 1 again, didn't know I was at the time. I just like this. It's always felt wrong because I was confused about allegedly what was supposed to have happened here, but that he could get away with it because he was following orders. That it wasn't matching up, so it caused a lot of dissonance for me. And whenever I think of him, it's always of confusion. So this is making a lot more sense, giving more background as to why he behaved the way he did. But it's still a lot of dissonance now because it's just like another prelude to Trump. It's like, okay, this is what we say we believe, but this is what we're doing. And
Mhm.
I don't see the greater good in this at all. So I struggle. I'm glad I struggle with it.
Right.
And I also connected it to in the Trump administration, the idea that you never admit that you did anything wrong, you never say, I screwed up, I'm sorry about that.
Mhm.
You say, how dare you question me?
Mhm.
And obviously what I did, not only was it not bad, it was actually perfect.
Mhm.
It was,
Mhm.
it was a perfect phone call. It was
Oh.
perfect, what,
You're starting to scare me.
like, but that you can see it here. It's,
Mhm.
he's not apologizing. He's not saying I shouldn't have done that. And I did what I had to do and I did the right thing. And you shouldn't be questioning making these hard decisions.
Right.
Mhm.
I listened to that town hall last week. I don't know why.
Oh
I
my
did-
gosh.
I did too.
Oh.
I left the room.
I didn't
I
think
left the
anyone
room.
would actually watch it.
Oh, I did.
Like I'll read about
I
it
listened
after,
to it, but I was
Bob,
thinking,
Bob ran out of the room. He said, "You watch it." I don't know."
I went
I
to the other
can't.
room.
I said, but it's like a train wreck. I've got to see it.
but I mean, I was listening to what he was saying. And I was thinking about all we've read in this book so far, and I'm thinking, oh yeah, okay, yeah, that I see, yeah, see that, I see that, I see
Mhm.
that, and
Mhm.
it just
I mean, we didn't learn anything new, but it just reinforced things that
He's
we
still
already.
saying it.
It's just-
After all
it's
these
just bad.
years, he's still saying it.
it's just bad behavior. But I think the most stark thing, the most telling thing was how he responded to the news from the day before that he was found liable
Liable.
for his
For assault.
for his sexual assault,
Mhm.
sexual abuse, and he just shrugged it off.
Mhm.
The worst part, though, and this is one of the things.
Roll my eyes on it.
One more word.
But the worst part, though, was the people in the audience were laughing.
Oh, right.
Yes,
Yeah.
they were.
And cheering him on.
Cheering him and
But
laughing.
they had the audience that they wanted,
Mhm.
Yeah.
people that had voted for him and
Mhm.
intend to vote for him, and
Yeah.
then they did have some undecided
Mhm.
independent voters,
I mean, but
but he,
when he maligned her again
Mhm.
in that discourse, he maligned the woman again. What's her name? I forget what her name is.
E. Jean Carroll.
Carol. Miss Carol. He maligned her again, and then he looked at the moderator and
Caitlin
told her
called
she
and
was a
said-
nasty person.
Yeah, he called her a
And
nasty
they-
Yes.
person.
And they
Because he didn't like the questions that she kept
Mhm.
asking. She held her own with him very well, I thought.
it's just, I
She
mean,
did
that's
a
just,
good job.
it's just poor behavior. And I was
He
thinking,
did
again,
shake her hand at the end, which I was surprised by.
how can
Mhm.
how can people that are evangelicals can continue to support
Yeah.
someone who exhibits this type of immoral behavior in public?
Mhm.
But
Because
but this,
he's following the rules of his book. He's following the rules of his
Exactly.
book, and
yeah, the book explains it,
Yeah.
why he gets away with that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Your description of the
Which-
town hall reminded me of the Sandy Hook guy. Shoot, what's his
Mm.
name?
Alex Jones.
Oh, Lord.
Glad that's what he's known as.
That guy.
That whole
He's
thing.
associated with that.
He owes like $1 billion in damages, and
Oh,
he's
but he don't
still
have any
off
money.
joking
But-
about it.
The thing that worries me though, the more I read in this book and the more I see how these people are, more it scares me for what's coming next.
Mhm.
It really frightens me.
Yeah, that was the point of what Russell Moore said today.
Mhm.
Is if children see this and there's not anything different,
Mhm.
it'll become normative for them, and
Mhm.
what'll happen when they grow up to be adults, what
Mm.
would it be like then?
I don't know. I wonder. Yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I wonder about that. Just being in a high school, and I know it's not your average high school, maybe, but having worked with these young people for the last few years, and Jen, you know more about this than I do because you're always in it. But I see these kids; they're just more accepting of everybody. They don't make hard and fast rules. The people that make hard and fast rules, and at least where I've been, and are the bullies with these really outdated ideas, they are the minority where I'm teaching, where I am hanging out. And I
But
have
Dawn,
hope
don't
for
you-
the future.
But Don, don't you think that as we continue in Texas and other places too, to take more things away from schools, like removing books that we don't want people to read and all, that we're going to make it harder for our young people to think for themselves and make good decisions for themselves and for their lives and for our country in general?
I absolutely
what's-
agree. And that's one of the reasons I'm so exhausted fighting these creeps that just got on our school board and looking at what they're passing in the legislature right now, replacing trained, committed school intervention counselors with pastors. Now, I know me some good pastors, no offense.
With marginally
but-
trained.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
it would, and it's like, but is this pastor going to listen to this kid who's struggling with their sexual identity, or are they going to
Exactly.
quote scripture
Yeah.
at them? There's a lot of, and what if it's one of my sweet Muslim kids and they're having some
Right.
struggles? Are they going to try to convert them instead of just help them? I don't know. I got a lot of questions. I think it's wrong. So I'm with you. What I'm saying though is the kids are pushing back. It's like I had a kid come into the library a couple weeks ago, goes to Gateway, and Robert Jeffries is one of those ones that's flashing all of the real Christians running for office and saying this is who you vote for. And his parents go to this church and he's part of it. And he comes in and he goes, so do you have a parental consent area? Do you have banned books? I'm like, yeah, baby, we have some banned books and here's my parental consent area if you're interested. He goes, no, I was just curious because our youth group was against it. They just thought that was crazy. His youth group, his parents are for it. His youth group is against it. He's a sophomore in high school, really super bright person. And he's like, I think it's okay if they want to have religious books in school. Why can't we have books about gender identity? He goes, I don't get it. What's their issue? So that's why I
Exactly.
say we have hope. We have hope in our kids. I think they see more and they do more than you think. This year, at the beginning of the year, one of my English teacher friends was out for medical reasons. And she had these really great, Evelyn had her for a teacher last year. She had these great posters and sayings on the walls. They came in and they put black paper over everything on her walls while she was out because of this new board. And so the kids got to see censorship in action, and they wrote a lot of comments on the door about it. But in order for her to display what she'd been displaying for 20 years, she was supposed to go through every little bit and explain it to them and have discussion on it. But otherwise, they just blacked it all out so they wouldn't have any trouble. They censored her classroom. Kids were not happy. They saw what was happening.
It's the Gestapo.
Yeah.
That's just incredible.
Mhm.
I mean, I feel sorry for the librarian that came after me because they're gonna have to go through a lot of books that they'll deem as inappropriate. Because I just felt like I was buying books for the students. I wasn't buying them for the parents or
Right.
the Congress or whatever. I was buying them for the kids, the ones that asked for the books and needed them.
Exactly.
So we were talking earlier about how, some of the people could get away with just about anything. But then here's this poor guy, Gorman. He didn't get away with it.
No.
He eventually confessed to one act of adultery, but he was also totally more the victim. But he actually got ostracized and lost all his money. So how come he got punished and no one else did?
That
Well,
sounded more
because
like a hostile takeover business move.
That was the other evangelist that took him over.
Swaggered,
Swaggered, yeah.
Oh, wow.
No
take
kidding.
over all their territory.
Yeah, I believe that.
And what I see happen a lot with evangelicals is they, in some way, I think they like having those characters because then they can point to them and say, that's what bad looks like. I don't do any of those things.
Right.
I'm a good person. I'm just,
Along for the ride.
subjugating women in my own church, but I'm not doing what these guys are doing. They're the bad ones. There's a whole thing a few weeks ago that I can't remember where I was reading because I sort of like get sucked into conversations within sort of evangelicalism and ex-evangelicals and stuff that's like outside of anything disciples, but I end up getting pulled in and I'm like, well, what was this about? Well, what did someone do? And then, I'm pulling and trying to figure it out. But it was someone was going over when a evangelical senior pastor, someone in a very significant position of leadership, has done something bad or had a pattern of behavior, that what they basically do is they admit to some very minor version of what actually happened. And then
Oh,
that gives them cover for saying, oh, well, see, this is all that happened. And then the leadership can say, oh, well, this is all that took place, and they're going to go to these classes, or they're going to take leave, and then they're going to come back. I think it was, what is his name? Matt Chandler
It was
Yep.
one just
At-
recently.
at the Village Church up
Yes,
in the north
we have
side.
friends that
Yeah.
go there, and they're always defending what's happening there when it's abusing young people, abusing women. They're like, oh, but and it's sad because we used to church with those people, and it's like, this. How can you follow this? I don't get it at all. So
Mhm. The Ruth Graham, who's a religion writer for the New York Times, who lives in Dallas, was there for his first Sunday back after his leave, and had this picture of just all these men on stage. They all have their hand doing like laying hands on him and welcoming him back and all this stuff. They're also all dressed in the same weird, like non-denominational casual garb that I like that. But it's like the faded jeans and the like pearl snap shirt. It's I don't know where they get this look from, but they're all dressed like that. But point of all that is that what people who are watching this and seeing this are taking away from it is whatever they admit to and the church says publicly that they're willing to admit to is just the tip of what actually took place. And now they've developed that's the rubric to interpret this whenever this happens, is whatever they're saying, it must have been a lot worse, but this is the piece they're willing to say so that they can get it over with and be reinstated.
And I'm a better person now, and
Mhm.
I'll never do that.
Mhm.
But they always have the whatever the governing council or governing entity or board or
Mhm.
whatever it is, that you never hear any dissent on. No, wait a minute.
Yes. Yeah, and that's what several people, or a lot of people, point out with the Village Church is, in all that about him, you never heard anything from the woman who had accused him of being inappropriate.
Mm.
Like her
It was
voice,
an inappropriate email.
her voice was not in any of
Yeah.
it. And no one asked, what do you think of this? Do you think he should be back in the book? Do you think this is appropriate? It was all from the perspective of the men leading the church saying, yes, he's fine, he's back, this is okay.
I think a part of that is because to protect the institution, they have to protect. In most cases, it's the founder of the institution.
Oh yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely.
And so they're almost like one and the same in a way. So you have to do something in order to be
Mhm.
able to make it okay.
Mhm.
but
And
they'll
there's
lose a lot of
no-
money if it suddenly goes down.
Yes,
They'll lose.
and there's
Yeah.
there's no denominational jurisdiction over
Nope.
them. They're
Nope.
accountable only to that board at that church who has a vested interest in making sure to preserve the institution. Disciples,
It's a
I'm not
business.
saying perfect at handling pastors who misbehave, but like all the ones that I have known who have done something or been accused of something, they've all lost their standing and they are no longer ministers. Like the committee on ministry looks into it, figures it out, and sometimes if it's if it was a gambling addiction or something like that, then they will give them, here is a path back to having standing if you're willing to do the work. But if it was anything that was in any way predatory, it's always nope, you're done.
It's good to have that.
So, and that's their role is not to preserve that particular church the person was leading. Their role is at the denominational level to make sure we don't have bad actors within our fellowship.
Unlike like the Southern Baptists or the Catholics, if you have a pastor or priest or whatever doing something inappropriate, we'll just ship him
Just
off
move
to
them to a
move
different diocese.
Yes, diocese, and don't tell anybody about what's happened.
Wow. I was at a retreat for this clergy transition ministry program and we ended up being at a Catholic retreat center in seminary north of Chicago. And one of my friends, she's now in Granbury, when we got there, she's like, so did you read about this place? I'm like, I mean, I just read that it's a retreat center and blah, blah, blah. And she's like, no, like did you see what's in the news for? And I'm like, no. She's like, this is where they're like warehousing all the priests who were accused of things and were like,
Wow.
you know, if they couldn't send them to another church, another parish, they would just send them all to just kind of live in purgatory here at this seminary and retreat center. And I'm like, great. So this is where we're going to be
This
for
is
the
where we're
week.
gonna be,
Okay.
yeah.
That's Georgia or something.
Yeah. So anyway,
Because you give them money, you are supporting
I
them,
guess,
that
I
they
don't
can go
know.
ahead and do what they're doing.
So when you mentioned earlier about the men at the church where Matt Chandler was, like, is that just a completely male dominated church?
yeah, I
Or
mean,
were
Oh,
you
yeah.
just saying men?
no, it's Southern Baptist. I mean, he's Southern Baptist. The word Baptist is not on anything anywhere for the Village
Oh, yeah,
Church,
it's not.
but that's what they are. And
It's
that's
very
how,
much, yeah, patriarchal, and you've got, your headship, the whole
That's
thing going
sort of-
on, complementarianism, and all of that is there. Mhm.
I think wasn't was it Bill Jones?
Bob?
Was that Bob Jones, the guy who did the
Jim Jones.
Jim Jones? Yeah, he was, I think, a
Yeah.
disciples preacher.
he was for a while.
Yeah.
Really?
He was
Oh.
many things over the years,
Yeah.
but there was a point where he got standing as a disciples
Yeah.
minister.
So it's kind of like,
I can't
yeah.
find the
Thank you,
picture
Bob.
that
Jim Jones. Just don't.
That I had seen.
Yeah, there's a quote, "I'm sorry I failed you."
This is the outfit though.
Oh,
So, yeah.
That some version
and
of
is
that.
that Matt Chandler? I guess I don't know anything about this one. I have to go home and Google it, I guess.
Are you talking about the village guys, their outfit?
Oh, here it is.
So it's
There
an
it is.
untucked
Here's the
shirt
picture.
and grunge
I'm gonna
jeans.
pull this up.
Oh, and they've got the vest.
Yes.
Oh.
Yes. Yes. This is it. Hold on.
Oh, Lord of mercy.
Where's Zoom and screen share? Okay. All right. So this is the attire that I'm talking about.
Oh yeah.
A lot of the button-up shirts, the like, what do you call those kind of vests? They're like the technical
Quilted.
quilted
the
The
type.
puffer vest.
Cool. Puffer is what I'm
Yes.
thinking too. Yeah.
Yes, they're all wearing some version of this. And again, yeah, it's all men who appear to be within about 10 years of age of each other.
Mm-hmm.
They
Um,
don't non-white person.
Yeah, I was gonna
In
say, is
in
that
memes, they call this the alpha dad outfit.
where is that? What did you
that
say?
is
that's
helpful.
where?
in memes.
I saw on Instagram or in different memes they call it the alpha dad outfit.
Okay.
That's true.
The
I've seen it
CEO of
once.
my former employer was always wear the vest.
But it was sort of, it had the sort of like tech startup culture vibe somewhat at your workplace.
Oh
right?
yeah. Oh yeah.
So that makes
And the
sense.
vest was Elevate branded. So.
He drank the Kool-Aid.
One final thing I will mention that was very startling to me was the whole piece about the chief of staff of the army in the early 80s being an evangelical and purchasing like 700 and some thousand
Yeah.
of that James Dobson video to give to everyone on active duty. That
Oh, wow.
is crazy to me.
Wow.
That's not culty at all.
Mm-mm.
No.
And I think now, you still do hear sort of things like that. Anyone like that is not going to make it to chief of staff. Like, you have to be able to be much more politically savvy and neutral
Unless you
to be palatable to be elevated to that level.
unless you report to Donald Trump, who's going to think that's an awesome thing for him
Sure.
to do.
But he appointed Mark Milley, and then he really did not like Mark Milley.
Yeah.
because Mark Milley does what a good chief of staff does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did he
Which
like
is not what
anybody
he
he appointed though? Because he ended up firing everybody. He ended up
Yeah,
firing
that's-
and fighting
that's-
with everybody he appointed.
The
Mostly
best
true,
people.
yeah.
The best people.
Very best.
Ivanka,
Hmm.
he liked their stuff.
That's right.
Right?
Did
Right.
not-
Yeah, maybe
did not-
maybe too much sometimes.
did not fire
Um,
did not fire his own daughter and son-in-law.
Yeah.
But apparently he was about to at one point, according to one of the books, and got talked out of it.
I think they're kind of firing him now, though, aren't they? They're kind of distanced
Mhm.
I think
themselves.
they are.
Yeah.
Yes.
They figured out they're pariahs in all their social circles
Mhm.
and need to fix that if they want to have a social life. There we go. 1980, page 129. It was 83. Army Chief of Staff John Wickham. And then he had arranged for Dobson's Where's Dad to be put everywhere. Now, anytime this happens, there's this organization that is sometimes good and sometimes maddening called the Military Religious Freedom Foundation. Have you read about them? That seems like one you would have come across. It's run by a lawyer and a former Air Force Academy graduate named Mikey Weinstein. And he just will file lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit anytime there's complaints about commanders doing these sort of religious things or undue things.
About that.
And so they do press releases and like they will shine light on any of that kind of stuff to where they have people freaked out about anything that could catch their attention. The downside is occasionally there will be things that's like, no, this is actually valid. You're picking the wrong fight here, because they've made a big deal about the Air Force, I think, Air Force or Navy, has this sort of like spiritual needs inventory that they want to be part of in processing to a new installation. And part of that is the idea of holistic fitness, which includes the person's spirituality and figuring out how do we provide resources for the person based on what their religious needs are. And they saw that as a test of religion to be in the, military. It's like, no, this is not what's going on here.
The thing that got me was in that very next paragraph at the end, where they said, the stronger the family, the stronger the army, because strong families improve our combat readiness. And of course, my mind went to the fact that we have like really crappy parental leave in America.
Yep.
And you can't build a strong family if you don't get the
Yeah.
bond with your kid
Mhm.
when they're born.
Yeah.
And I'm just, I'm up in arms about that one.
Mhm. Absolutely. So, all right. Well, we are past our hour. Any final thoughts? Things we missed that you want to talk about?
No, I get to talk about the whole book this coming Wednesday with my other book group, and I have a few
Oh,
chapters
yeah.
left.
Oh, yeah.
But this will help prepare me at least for the first half of the book. And you guys
Yeah.
are going to enjoy the next couple of chapters on the peacekeepers. That brings again all kinds of thoughts. So I can't
Oh,
wait to
Promise
talk to you
Keepers.
guys about that. Promise Keepers, yeah,
So,
Promise
like,
Keepers.
Yeah,
the
yeah.
Proud
I think
Boys or-
Yeah.
chapter. No, this is Promise
See-
Keepers,
Oh,
which
okay.
was the like
Men's movement.
Christian men's movement
Gotcha.
in
All these
the-
things start out like a good idea, but they go so crazy, It's just like, yeah, be more
off the rails.
committed, be less of a jerk. I like those ideas, but yeah, it all goes bad. So
Okay. All right. Well, chapter 8 and 9 for next week.
Sounds good.
And we'll see
thanks,
all
you
then.
guys.
Thanks,
Good to see
Don.
y'all.
Appreciate your
Bye, Don. Bye,
time.
Jennifer.
Happy Mother's Day, everyone.
Happy Mother's Day.
Yes. Happy Mother's Day. That's where we're headed.
Where y'all having dinner?
Oh, well, we have babies, so we're going to Cracker Barrel.
Yeah.
That's a good choice.
You gotta dress up for Cracker Barrel.
Oops.
So we're going.